Caregivers, have you ever felt like nothing? I mean, nothing is going right? Well, cheer up and welcome to Dave the Caregiver's Caregiver radio program, where you'll learn how to avoid that dreaded thing called caregiver burnout and how to survive the grief process. You know, with roughly 100 million caregivers in the U.S. and Canada alone, that's about a third of the population. That means that everyone probably knows someone caring for a loved one. Join Dave and his guests now and every Wednesday at noon Pacific Time as they discuss avoiding caregiver burnout and surviving grief. So find a comfortable place to relax, kick up your feet, and prepare to feel better and to receive practical tips and tools that you can start using immediately to get you through today and every day so you can survive your tomorrows. But not just survive, but to live life fully and abundantly. Yes, you heard me right. That is a possible goal to achieve. And now, here's your host, Dave Nassani. From Los Angeles, Big LA, welcome to all my listeners out there in Radio Land. I'm Dave, the Caregiver's Caregiver, coming to you live globally through the famous Blog Talk Radio, as well as 7 other audio and video platforms, including YouTube and iTunes, where all our recorded pod and video casts are saved for your later on-demand listening pleasure, including, of course, our website, caregiverscaregiver.com. Our goal here is to do our very best to help you avoid that dreaded thing called caregiver burnout. Sounds nasty, I know. We have an exciting show planned for you today with my lovely co-host, founder of the Caregiver Space, Adrienne Gruberg. Say hello, Adrienne.
Hello.
Oh, good, she's there. And she can hear me. We've been having a lot of technical difficulties today. Today, we will be interviewing each other. One of the rare times that we can just relax, as if we've been relaxing all this time, trying to figure out what the problem was, connecting, and have a conversation together about what's important to caregivers with each other, about your questions and concerns. You will not want to miss this show. As I said, I'm your host, Dave Nassani, and the show's caregivers of every single kind. Now, one thing we know about caregivers is that they're caring, selfless, sacrificial souls, but they have this tiny little problem. They're very prone to caregiver burnout, you see. And 30% of caregivers actually die before their loved ones do, and 60% actually get sicker, hospitalized, need a caregiver themselves. Now, that's just unacceptable as far as I'm concerned. And I think we can reverse this. So we have to first raise awareness that caregivers are dying, and then give some advice on how they can stop dying and live. Now we can learn something from the airlines who tell us in the event of an emergency, put your oxygen mask on first before you help your loved one with their mask. Hello, what an amazing metaphor for all of life. Take care of you first, not out of selfishness, but out of survival. Now, then we talk about the grief process, right? Anytime you suffer loss, you go through a grief process. Well, you know, there's only one way out. There's no shortcuts, no going around it, and that's to go through the grief process. And that's not fun. I didn't say it was fun. But hopefully, if you feel like you're stuck in your grief, we can help you get unstuck, okay? And I do want to thank Jim Dowda, RN, last week, speaking about observations that he's seen about caregivers. Very good interview, and you can listen to that interview and this interview on my website, caregiverscaregiver.com, and all the other platforms that I mentioned, iTunes, etc. Let's see. Our book signing is going on. We're going to be in New York. We're going to hook up with Adrienne. We're finally going to be in the Big Apple together. It's never happened before. She's come out and visited me, but I'm going to be there, and so I'm expecting you, Adrienne, to recommend a very good place, because Charlene is a gourmet cook, and we don't want to disappoint her, because she's very picky about what she eats. You know, without breaking the budget, of course, if that is even possible in New York, which I don't think it is. All right, enough of that. Welcome, Adrienne. And
Thank
welcome
you.
me. Why don't you just say welcome, Dave?
Welcome, Dave.
Oh, thank you, because it sounds funny me saying that to myself. So what we're going to do today, I'm going to bring up my Facebook page, as I recommend, and pardon me while I reach here. So I have a very interesting post today. Sometimes I'm surprised at the posts. You know, I approve them, and then 2-3 days later, So this one is called um, Many of today's seniors were most likely middle-aged during the Reagan-era war on drugs. Weed was the gateway drug and considered just as dangerous as crack cocaine. Anti-weed PSAs were aptly making the perils of using pot easy to understand. And let us not forget the reefer madness mentality of the 30s. Anyway, these old seniors now are lighting up because they're understanding from these states that are now legal, like Colorado, and California, all the weird states, uh, that smoking weed can alleviate pain from arthritis. It can take away the seizures that they've been having and other different things. So anyway, a lot of people are interested in doing this. And it's so like out of character because many of them were telling their kids not to do it. What's your opinion on cannabis, which is the fancy way of saying marijuana, weed, reefers, all that stuff?
I'm for it. Uh, I
Okay, you
mean,
heard it, folks. She's for it.
I'm not someone who does any of it, but
Yeah,
I
back
certainly don't have. I've never had a problem with it.
back in
Um,
back in the 70s, I was a pothead. I mean,
yeah, so was I.
we used to do it every single day, every single night, and
Yep.
somehow I managed to get through 4 years of college with good grades, and then I didn't do it for like 40 years, and then I had so much pain in my back from this herniated disc. Everyone said, "Have you tried weed? Have you tried weed?" I says, "No, no, I don't really want to get into that." But I did try because they kept bugging me the candy things, the edibles
Yeah.
they call them,
Right.
and trying to figure out, well, how much is this worth of weed,
Mm-hmm.
and
You need
and
to find
so
your dose.
yeah, so uh, and of course you overdo it. One time I was like stoned out of my gourd, and I says, I do not like this. This is bringing back too many memories. And,
Yeah.
and so, cutting back and just trying to find the right dose that it did help me sleep. It did take my mind off the pain, but it had a lot of things that I didn't. I needed to function. I needed to drive. I needed to do things. I needed to just not feel like a zombie. And
Okay.
so after a while, I just said, after I got my miraculous healing where the heat was in my back, and all of a sudden the guy at the MRI says, "Wow, your 8 millimeter shrunk to 4 millimeter," and so I didn't need it anymore, and I just stopped, and so I don't do it anymore. But a lot of people are doing it, and so yeah, if it helps, I'm saying do whatever helps because caregivers are in trouble. Like I said, 30% of them are dying, 60% of them are getting sicker. I mean, and those statistics ring true, right? You know people who have died before their loved one, right?
Yes, I
And you,
do. But are
and
you
you,
are you are you recommending edibles or marijuana for the caregiver or the patient?
whatever they can tolerate.
Because
I
the
try
caregiver needs to be clear-headed.
absolutely. When I went to get the edibles, they said, "Oh, here you get a free joint." And I'm Middle Eastern, so we just can't turn down something that's free. So
Yeah.
And I hung on to it for a long time because I didn't want to go back to the 40 year. But one day when I ran out of edibles, I said, "Well, I do have that joint," and I went outside so I didn't stink up the house, and it burned my throat,
Yeah.
and it brought back even more bad memories of that I didn't want, and it was just irritating. I didn't like it at all. It was just bad. And people get throat cancer from inhaling
Of
weed
course.
smoke, just like inhaling tobacco smoke. And I'm a healthy guy, and I just remember that burning sensation that wouldn't go away. And I says, I'm not. I just threw the thing away. And so, but in this video that I saw, you got three elderly women, and they got a bong, and they're just, whatever you can do. I personally, if I was going to do it, I would not.
What's elderly?
They looked like they were in their older than you, in their late 70s. Obviously older than me, but it was a funny video, I remember. But just seeing three senior citizens who all admit that they've never done it before in their life,
Uh,
and I don't know if it's good or bad trying to remove the hindrances that people have in their mind from doing it, because the jury's still out as far as I'm concerned about legalizing it for recreational purposes, because accidents are going up. Uh, I know alcohol is that, but if someone's not drinking and has no problem with alcoholism and stuff like that, and maybe they don't know if they
you don't
are.
need to be an alcoholic to drive drunk.
That's true. And some people don't know they're an alcoholic until they take their first drink. Some people may not know that they are prone to genes of drug addiction until they take their first hit. So
Hmm.
I'm iffy. I just don't know. I'm not going to sit there and recommend that you do it, but if you're absolutely convinced that you want to try it. And if you don't like it, stop it. And if you don't like the smoke thing, try some of the edibles, and find that magic dose that doesn't make you stoned out of your gourd.
Yeah.
Because I don't think you should be stoned out of your gourd. Now, for the caree, maybe they should be stoned out. Did I say that out loud? I
It
don't know
depends.
how.
It depends on where they are in their illness.
Yeah, I don't know how someone with dementia or Alzheimer's would react
I
under
have
the
no
influence
idea.
of marijuana. I don't know if it would make them better or make them worse. So I don't know.
I've really only heard of it being used therapeutically in terms of pain,
Yeah.
arthritis and cancer and not dementia and Alzheimer's,
hmm
except maybe to make them forget even more and have an
So,
excuse for it.
so I'm looking to see what other people have written on my Facebook page. Did you happen to? I know I suggested you bring yours up. Did you do that, or is that just too complicated
No, I
with
brought
one
mine up,
device?
but I also had to shut my computer down, so I have
Yeah,
to
it's all
sign
messed
on
up
it
now.
again.
Well, let me see what I can find, because obviously it's not on this one, but it's on the other one because I switched computers here. Um, I just did an interview last week. A Rear Admiral uh, who is retired now, but a member of the Joint Chief of Staff. He had stage 4 cancer. They told him, Admiral, you have stage 4 cancer. And, he just kind of thought that since everything in America is rated from 1 to 10, David Letterman's 10 worst this, and the military does that too, 1 to 10, scale of 1 to 10. And so he says, well, that's good. At least that, I've got some wiggle room here. 10 is worse. And he looked at him and he says, Admiral, there is no stage 4. This is serious. So as a result of that, he attacked that cancer the way he attacks, as a military man, war. You go into it uh, with the intention of winning this war. So first thing he did, he learned everything he could about cancer, because you have to know your enemy if you want to defeat your enemy. Well, make a long story short, he's cancer free and it's in remission. And so he has a great story to tell. He started a speaking career. He retired from the Navy, and him and I shared the same stage at a marketing boot camp, and he was amazing. So I brought him on the show, and he was amazing again. And he's got a wonderful wife who just is his is his support and is his cheerleader and is his agent. And thank God she's just a hands-on caregiver, and she's amazing. Okay, so let's see. Here's a post that says 5 ways to control diabetes. Caregivers often get diabetes because they don't eat right, they don't sleep right, they don't exercise, and so they get a little overweight. When you get a little
Hmm.
overweight, you're subject to diabetes, and that's one reason why you could get sicker than the person you're caring for. Uh, you have a lot of pages, smaller pages that talk about cancer, talk about spousal, talk about, post-traumatic syndrome. I don't know if you have that one yet, but what are some of the things that you've seen just from the more intimate pages that people feel more free to talk about in a smaller setting that maybe they don't feel comfortable talking about in a larger setting?
Um, I think I think pre-grieving. Um,
Pre-grieving, that's an interesting concept. Can you explain that?
well, I mean, I knew from the day Steve was diagnosed with cancer in 2005 that eventually he would die from it. They told me that it would go away. He would have a brief remission, and that his was the kind of cancer that would eventually come back. So to me, when I got the diagnosis, it was an eventual death sentence. So I needed to get my head screwed on straight to both be a caregiver while I could be a caregiver, but
Uh-huh.
also to lose him, knowing that despite whatever we might do, I mean, I was still hopeful that, look, time passes and there are all sorts of new treatments. We did whatever we could, but I was ready. Um, and there is a period, sometimes from the time of diagnosis, where you start to grieve because you know that you're going to be experiencing loss, and the loss, you lose different parts of the person, as happens
Yeah.
with dementia and Alzheimer's patients. They're still alive, but they're not the person that you knew. They're not they're not accessible to you anymore the way they used to be.
Yeah.
And with Steve, it became, there were activities we couldn't do. Um, he might need to be available for this or that. He was more fearful than he had been. So I was grieving for our way of life and all of the changes and preparing myself for when and if, he would pass. And he did. Why am I looking at buttons on his shirt here?
'Cause I'm
I am
I'm
looking
about
at your chin. That's all I'm
I'm
seeing.
you weren't
Your
supposed to say
chin
that.
and your
You weren't
shirt.
you weren't supposed to notice that I was balancing two computers and they all fell down. All right, but we're back.
So
Um, it's
you heard what
difficult
I was
using two
saying, though.
computers. Yes, of course. I heard every single word. But yeah, that's absolutely right. Um, I'm trying to get a post here while you're talking. But boy, apparently you learn. You think you're
I mean, you had.
multi-talented.
I mean, you had a life with Charlene that changed drastically. Um, where there had to be some feeling of loss about the way you used to live versus the way you live now.
Yeah, people don't realize it, and I didn't realize it for a long time that um, I also was grieving. I didn't realize I was grieving, but
Hmm.
I was grieving because what loss did I have? Well, I lost my wife. I did not have a wife anymore, not the one that I had before. This was
Exactly.
a new woman. She had a different personality. She was not able to do the things she could do before. And it's like, well, where did my wife go? It's like she died. And and it took me a while to like realize that. I thought this was just going to be a little speed bump, that she's going to be fine. Won't be long before everything's, comes back again. But gosh, little did I know that, you're not in Kansas anymore,
You're not in
Toto.
Kansas anymore.
You know. And so I suffered the symptoms of grief, which is first denial. This isn't happening. This is all going to be okay, and then after the days turn into weeks, the weeks turn into months, the months turn into years. I don't exactly know when it was, but the first 2 years was a living hell for both of us because we were both adjusting to this new normal and neither of us liked it.
And she must have been grieving too.
Oh, she was very angry, and she was
Uh-huh.
taking her anger out on moi because I was the
Right?
only one around. The Mills brothers sing, "You, you always hurt the ones you love, the ones you shouldn't hurt at all." And
Because
boy,
they'll take it.
yeah, well, I'm not going anywhere. But after a while, I had to just scream out to the universe, I can't take this anymore. And
Right?
so I had to sit down and write her a letter, and some of you have heard this story again and again and again. I'll tell it one more time that, I wrote her a letter. I said, Charlene, why are you so mean to me? He says, I, I'm just trying to take care of you and be your husband, but you're making it very difficult. I know that it's hard on you, but you're making it impossible for me. I just don't think I can be with you. I'll take care of you financially, but I just can't be with you. And it broke my heart to write that letter because,
I'm
we were
sure.
in love. We had a fairy tale storybook romance, courtship, and marriage for the first 21 years of our lives together, raised 3 daughters, got them all married, had a couple of grandkids. I mean, life was good. We were getting ready to enter the
Mm-hmm.
emptiness phase of life. And then all of a sudden, she has this headache, the headache of her life, 3 days. And by the fourth day, it was no longer a headache. By the time the
Mm-hmm.
ambulance arrived, it was too late. And so I just felt guilty most of the time because I was resenting my wife, and she was angry and bitter most of the time, and I just didn't have the heart to give her the letter because it made me feel better. And I recommend that people should write letters without the
Or
intention of
write it in
giving
your
them.
journal.
And it's right
Get your
here.
feelings out there.
It's right here, still in my filing cabinet, and I can take it out and read it anytime I want, 21 years later, and just relive those memories. I say, wow, I am sure glad I didn't give that to her. Obviously, she knows the story now because I keep telling it on television and stuff. And to my amazement, I thought she was going to be really upset, but she's cool now. And after a
Mm-hmm.
couple of years, she started, you know, um, being her old self again, and our love was rekindled, and things start. So there was a 2 year period that I just don't want to repeat for $1 million, but I also am glad that it happened and wouldn't want it to like go away. I wouldn't pay $1 billion for it to go away because it taught us both so much,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm so wise now, you know, and
Yes,
she's
we're
still
very
wise.
wise.
Yeah, wisdom comes at a great price,
I was just going to say exactly the same thing. Yeah. It's a
and
high price ticket. Yeah.
and as a result, we're going to take a short break because that's a good spot to just stop and meditate and ponder on what I just said. So don't go away. We'll be right back.
Being a caregiver takes a special person with passion and compassion. But even you can become a little burned out from time to time. The Caregiver's Caregiver radio show was developed to help you overcome obstacles, adversity, and burnout, as well as just having a place to rest, relax, and recharge your batteries. We've all been there, and you're not alone. Now, you can take the Caregiver's Caregiver with you. Get the top 25 radio shows in convenient form that plugs right into your USB car stereo or computer. Learn the techniques, tips, and encouragement we all need to better handle the day-to-day challenges. For around $1 per show, just $29.77, get the credit card-sized USB card to have with you anytime you need a caregiver's pick-me-up. Just go to DaveTheCaregiversCaregiver.com and order yours today. Go to DaveTheCaregiversCaregiver.com now. Consider it an investment in you, and ultimately, an investment in them.
Anytime we suffer loss, we grieve. And a lot of people don't realize what even the grief process is. But it could be 5 to 7 steps ranging from denial, I don't believe this is happening, anger, oh my gosh, I'm so upset this is happening, to a form of bargaining, how can I get out of this, to depression, which is a very serious thing because that often leads to suicide. And then finally, after you realize you have no more control over your situation, and you're totally okay with the new normal that it brings, that wonderful, wonderful place called acceptance. And we're back with Adrienne Gruberg and Dave Nassandy. You know, part of that grief process is also depression, because every now and then everyone feels blue. You know, it's part of life. But if your loved one no longer enjoys activities that they once liked, you know, they may have a more serious problem. And, you know, being consistently depressed can change the way you think and feel. And that's called clinical depression. What's your experience with people who are posting about depression, or, you know, the difference between feeling blue?
Being someone who's clinically depressed, because I have a thyroid condition, and your thyroid affects everything about your moods. So
Right.
I've been on antidepressants now for over 30 years.
Does it help? Does it take the edge off of life?
No, not when you're properly cared for. No, you wouldn't know that I was medicated. No,
How do you know?
it's a chemical imbalance when you're really clinically depressed, and your your hormones and everything else have to be put back in balance, and sometimes that takes a bit of time and a bit of doing and finding the right antidepressant. Not every antidepressant works for everybody. I mean, they will, with all of those side effects that they list on television, you know, from suicide. Well, thanks a lot, you know. No, that
Yeah,
one's
I
not for
mean,
me.
you're taking this
Um,
pill to prevent suicide, and you're saying it can cause suicide.
yeah,
Uh,
well, you know, antidepressants can cause depression, just like anti-anxiety drugs can cause anxiety. Those things happen. So, I mean, there are certainly a lot of people that I've recommended talk to somebody about whether or not they need an antidepressant, or whether or not they just need somebody to talk to. Sometimes all a depressed person has to do is talk or write about what's going on with them to
Journal.
lift it off, you know, off their shoulders.
Hmm.
Um, Clinical depression is different. All the talking in the world isn't going to do it for you.
Right.
But I went through a natural depression, an appropriate depression. Of course, when Steve was diagnosed, we both did. We shared that together. But that was a depression aside from the clinical depression.
Wow.
And when I was a patient just now, I'm first completely coming out of my depression, which
Hmm.
again was a legitimate depression, not a chemical depression, because everything changed. I was bedridden for 2.5, 3 months, and couldn't do the things that I'm used to doing, and wasn't me. So,
You're talking about your
I
knee surgery.
my knee surgery, yes. So once life starts to get back to normal, you start to be able to function in a different way again. You start to feel an awful lot better.
Yeah.
When you start to recognize yourself again. I mean, I would tell Eddie, I'm not me. And that was the way I felt. I'm not me right now. Uh,
So
when
that's
you
a
feel,
clue to go see the doctor.
yeah, and I did. Um, Even though I was already on medication. It was time for me to see him in a different state than he was used to seeing me in. And
Yeah.
happily, the last time I saw him, which was last week, he said, "Oh, you're back to yourself." So
Mm.
I was glad of that. But
Yeah.
there's no shame in being depressed because your life is changing around you as a caregiver. There's a lot of resentment with caregiving.
Hmm.
People don't want to be taking care of some of the people that they take care of. I mean, I took care of my mother, um, not because I liked my mother even remotely, but because I promised my father I would do it.
Yeah.
People do things for different reasons, and I just had to keep remembering I was doing it for him. I had promised him to make his passing easier, because he was hanging on to, he was the caregiver,
Yeah.
and he was
Yeah.
hanging on to take care of her.
Yeah. The infamous deathbed promise
Yeah,
can be pretty devastating. Do you kind of wish you didn't make that promise?
no, no.
Are there some?
I even if I hadn't made the promise, I know that between my brother and myself, I would have been the one that was there for her. I was a long
Hmm.
distance caregiver, but I was in Florida at least a week out of every month after my father died for 3 years, sometimes a month out of every 3 months,
Hmm.
near the end. But I was there for her when she needed me.
Yeah.
Um, and I once asked her if I could do one thing for you that would help you, that would cheer you up. What would it be? What can I do for you? And she said, just call me every day.
Yeah.
And to
Oh,
me, that was
jealous.
hell.
Oh,
That was the hardest thing
really?
to do, was call every day. But once once you got used to that call every day, sometimes I'll be at my beach house, and at 8 o'clock on a Thursday night, it's like, oh my God, I got to call my mother. And this is 14 years now.
And how
And I
long do
still,
those calls last? That's the issue.
when you don't talk to your parents for a long time, the calls can last a long time. The first 15 minutes is when they'll just make you feel guilty about the fact that you haven't called,
Yeah, they waste
and
15
then they'll
minutes telling
catch
you
up.
why. Yeah.
But I mean, when I would call every day, it was, so what was your day like? So what was your day like? And maybe it was a 5 minute phone call,
Oh, well,
but
that's
it
not
was
bad.
just touching base, and it did make her life better.
Now, from your followers, are there promises that some of them have confessed that they wish they didn't make to their loved one?
That's not something that I've even read about. I'm
I have
sure that
one.
with all of the posts that have been up there, that somebody's
I
written about it, but I didn't
I
see it.
have I have one, and I'm sure you would agree that you must have seen it. It was about making a promise to the loved one while they were in a normal state, maybe years
Hmm.
ago, that if I ever get to be like that, don't ever
Oh,
put me in a nursing home. And
oh,
now
of
all of a
course.
sudden they have dementia, or they don't know them, and they're just guilt-ridden because they made this promise.
Well, that's
Uh,
not a deathbed promise.
right. Uh, it's not a deathbed promise, but it was a
But that
promise.
that conversation goes on between parents and children all the time.
Yeah. So I'm not foolish enough to have my children promise that they would do that to me because I don't want them to be that. But I do sometimes jokingly, not jokingly, jokingly, not jokingly, uh, promise that, you know what, if I ever get to be like Charlene's mother, I'll tell you where the guns are and make it look like an accident. We were cleaning the
Yeah,
gun and we all laugh, but I'm serious.
yeah. No, I tell people to just roll me off the roof. Just.
Well, and others, I was telling that story, and this woman says, I've done the same thing to my children, but it's not guns, it's pills, and it's true. I remember the doctor telling me to not leave the pills around Charlene, and this was when she was going through the 2 years of
Sure.
grief.
Sure.
And I says, really? And he says, yeah. I says, people actually do that? He says, yeah, my male
Yep.
patients use a gun, very messy, and the female patients just take pills because it's cleaner.
Female patients tend to take pills.
So, very
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
Uh, the other thing that I wanted to talk about, simpler things, like for example, I did a post not too long ago, and it says, and when I first read it, I says, oh, this isn't going to be a good post, but it actually was. How do you keep, because I mean, how do you keep an elder warm without cooking yourself? And I thought, that was going to be a dud, but everybody just came alive on that one because
Electric
apparently,
blankets.
yeah, lots of blankets and heating pads sporadically. Sweatsuits, jacket,
Yeah.
warm blanket that's not too heavy, warm beverages, mittens, knit cap, if necessary, when possible, warm clothing, robes, blankets, etc., in the dryer for a short time. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it in the hospital when you just come out of surgery or something,
Yeah.
and they give you this blanket that just came out of the microwave or something. It's just so warm because
Oh, I had a
it's
blanket in the hospital that filled up with hot air. It was like a
my.
feather of hot air all around me. It was amazing. But
Because they keep them
because the
in
room
such
is so
cold,
cold.
yeah, to kill germs or something. Here's a woman that said, my mom sits in 90-degree weather and the furnace is on 70 and she's
I,
still cold and we have to sit with all the windows shut like it's a sauna in her house. So she hasn't
yeah.
figured out to use the blankets and all the other things.
Yep.
So she's just a newbie, I guess.
Well, I
Uh,
mean, there are a lot of people who are sensitive to drafts.
yeah.
They'll tell you there's a draft in here. So no, they can be wearing 10 blankets, but they'll still be feeling the draft, which
Yeah.
which used to drive me nuts.
And here's a
My
woman
mother felt
says
the draft.
says frozen water bottles for me, dressed for the inside and not the outside. And then, oh, no kidding, 80 degrees and I'm heat intolerant. Phew. And then sweaters, blankets, or just a hug, you know. But yeah, my wife, I keep getting these notices from the utility companies saying, they compare your usage with your neighbor's usage. And
Oh, they
then with,
do.
yes, and so my neighbors might use, I don't know what the number is, like 600 therms of heat. And I'm using 1200. And I said, it's not me. It's my wife, just likes to be toasty warm. And says,
Hmm.
put your thermostat at 68 for heat and 78 for AC. And my wife just absolutely, no, I'd be freezing, and one time, we just dressed her all up and her nose is like cold and her nose is the only thing sticking out. And I took a picture of it because she looked so funny. And, I finally just told the utility company, I'm sorry, I have a wife who's disabled and paralyzed on the right side. She's speech impaired and she had a stroke and those temperatures just don't work for her. And so
Did they work with you at all?
they put me on that special program for the electricity. So my electric bill went from $500 and $600 a month in the summertime to $200 and $300 a
All
month.
right, so they
'Cause
did work with you.
the more you use, the higher the rate that they pay. They're like penalizing. They're saying, hey,
What they
you
they
know,
they rate you, they prorate you. It's the highest month.
yeah. And so they almost the letter is a very condescending. I said that right. Letter.
Condescending.
Yes, that letter, because they make you feel like you should be guilty because you're an energy hog. None of your neighbors are doing this. Why are you doing it? And it's like, ooh. But and same with the heat and the air conditioning. So maybe you have that problem, and just let them know that you have a special situation, and they'll give you a break. There goes the computer
Yeah, I
again.
have a bi-coastal boyfriend who's used to California temperatures, and when he comes to New York, he's always cold.
My coastal.
It's a totally different mindset. So, no, Not well. One of the ways that I knew that Steve was getting more and more frail was that he was the one who always wanted to keep the house really, really cold.
Really?
And like when we would go to the beach house, he would set the air conditioning at 68. And I mean, if you came in from the beach and you came into that kind of a temperature, you'd be frigid,
Yeah,
walking into a house that cold. But
yeah.
that's the way he wanted it. He wanted to freeze until he started to get ill. And then he was the one who wanted to keep things warmer and warmer. And I'm cold, I'm cold, I'm shivering, I'm cold. So
Yeah.
things did change.
Yeah, I remember when we first got married, I'm Middle Eastern, so I'm hot-blooded. I was always hot, and she was always cold, and I guess that's pretty typical in marriages. Well, listen, let's take
Yeah.
another break because we're going to have a slightly shorter show than normal because we got such a late start. So don't go away. We'll be right back. Dave Nassani, the Caregiver's Caregiver, has just released his sixth book entitled It's My Life Too. Reclaim your caregiver sanity by learning when to say yes and when to say no. It was specifically written for caregivers who know they should be putting their needs first, but just don't know how. Dave is the sole caregiver to his wife, Charlene, since 1996. He knows firsthand what caregivers are going through because he is one. And he now speaks all across the country offering caregivers his incredible caregiver support package. Even the airlines tell us that in the event of an emergency, to put your oxygen mask on first before you help your child with their mask. They know that those who don't heed their advice often black out, thus becoming unable to help either themselves or their child. And caregivers are exactly the same way. It's My Life Too. Reclaim your caregiver sanity by learning when to say yes and when to say no. Will help caregivers who are neglecting their sleep, diet, and social life and learn to put their needs first. Pick up your copy today or buy one for your special caregiver. On sale everywhere and at caregiverscaregiver.com. And we're back with me and Adrienne and I. And so, any thoughts of some people who are going through stuff, Adrienne? Or let me look
People
at
who are
my.
going through stuff. Oh God.
I know I have the.
It's I'm at the age where everybody's going through something.
You notice that everybody's
Yeah.
going through something. It's like they all have their tailor-made trials to just. Uh, but God trying to help them reach perfection, and this one probably needs that, and that one needs that, and they can't handle what I'm doing, and I can't handle what they're doing. So you see, they're all just custom made for us.
And
So
well,
that
there was a time when conversations were around, who you're going out with and what's your sex life like, and now it's all about who's sicker than who and what pills are you taking,
yeah. So
it's
let me show you my scar. Oh, well, that's nothing. Let me
right,
show you my scar. My scar is bigger than your scar.
right.
And I wrote a post the other day. It says, "How has caregiving changed your views of life and aging?" Boy, that's a loaded question, huh?
That's a loaded question.
So here, one girl said, "It has made me appreciate each day for its simplicity. My husband has an LVAD, which I don't know what that means. This time last year, they were putting him into hospice. Life is truly fragile, and having more time gives me more time to tell him how much he has motivated me to be the best person I can be. We met in the 9/11, and he has changed my life. Thank you, Dave." I guess he's still alive, huh? Some people go into
Sounds that way.
hospice, and they
Some
just
people
they
go
don't
into
get out.
hospice and come out.
They
Oh
got to get
yeah,
him out of there. They just,
a lot of people
yeah. Why is that?
because they're not they're not in the condition to stay in the hospital anymore.
Yeah, but I mean, the reason someone goes into hospice is because they're expected to die soon, and
Not necessarily.
this guy's still around after a year, and sometimes they have to take you out of hospice, maybe convert you to palliative care, which is the thing that I think they invented because people need a form of hospice, but they may not be dying or they don't know when they're going to die. They could just drag on for months and years, who knows, especially people with dementia. So here's another one. In the moment lives are changed, the post-stroke road can be an extraordinarily long one. Yes, amen to that. There seems to be no bottom
Yeah.
to loneliness. The caregiver and the patient live in a state of mutual solitude. Boy, that's deep, huh? Mutual solitude.
Yeah.
What is mutual solitude? Do you know?
Living your own life.
Just kind of like roommates, mutual solitude? Yeah, I guess so, together. Here's another
Um,
one. This lady says, multi-levels house are not appealing. One, I'm thankful to have balance to wash my feet. Two, I'm motivated to eat plants, no sugar and
mhm.
exercise my brain and body. Three, I'm finally more spontaneous because you have to do what you can when you can.
When you
So
can.
yeah, so that woman is just, you know,
Together.
making lemonade out of lemons. Here's another
Yeah.
one. It has made me more aware of little things, missing handrails, trip hazards, temperature, clothes that are harder to get in and out of. Oh, I hate buttons, little tiny
You
buttons
hate
that I have to.
buttons?
My wife's buttons, she can't button, so I got to
Oh,
button. And I mean, I'd rather have a root canal than to button some of these buttons. It passes so quickly, but for someone sidelined by age or illness, it creeps when there's more here, so much they can no longer do. I've recognized that if you are too busy, spend time and energy on someone you love while you can, you are too busy. Period. That's
mm,
true. I've learned that listening to someone reminisce about the good old days, quote unquote, can be very interesting and enlightening. I've learned that life is short and fragile. Enjoy it while you can. And I've kind of realized that people talk about the good old days, but you know what? Like that song says, these are the good old
good.
days.
Yeah, exactly.
Who sang that? Linda
Carol
Ronstadt
King.
or Carole King? Here's another one. Sorry, Carol. Uh, I just hope there's someone like me when my time comes. Amen to that.
Well, I think getting the person you're caring for to talk to you and tell you stories if they can, uh, especially people with Alzheimer's and dementia, who sometimes music will trigger a memory,
Yeah.
and they'll start coming forth with stories, and those stories are priceless. They're good for both the person telling them and the person hearing it.
And here this woman made a promise I don't know if she'll be able to keep. She says, let's face it, we're all headed in the same direction. After my first caregiving assignment, so obviously she's a paid caregiver, I told my son that when I reach the point of needing assistance, quote, I promise to be good, unquote. I don't
I
know about
promise to
that
be good.
promise. I promise to be good. She's just trying to con him into being her caregiver. Because there's always a
Well,
favorite son, isn't there?
there's usually the daughter is usually the caregiver.
I know. Don't expect that son to be a caregiver. It's rare. It's very, very rare.
Nope, I was the daughter-in-law caregiver. The sons were pretty much useless.
What is it?
They meant
70%?
well, but
70% are women, or is it 80%? Or
I don't know for
it's a
sure.
high number.
It's
It's
a
a
high
high number.
number. Um, uh, the there is the phenomenon, and I'm one of these people. I'm a solo senior. I have no children. I have no spouse. So I have to consider what's going to happen as I get older,
Yeah.
um, depending on whether or not the, the amount of help that I need. Um,
Yeah.
so, long-term care was
So you,
was part of my life as soon as Steve passed. I wanted, for my 50th birthday, I wanted him to get me a long-term care policy. I didn't get it until I was 63. So that changed the price a lot. It's very expensive, but I don't have anyone to take care of me. Can't expect my brother, my niece, my nephew, my sister. I can't expect anyone to do that. So I'm not the only one that finds himself in that situation either.
well, it's not necessarily bad to not have children all of your life because there are things that you won't experience that you'll be fortunate that you didn't experience. For
Oh, I,
example,
I know that.
I bet none of your children, which you don't have any, broke your heart when they married the wrong person and they didn't listen to you, or so you're ahead of the game there. And let's face it, kids never call their parents like enough, and so you'll never have kids who won't call you, so you won't feel bad about that. So there's the light side.
No, I know that there are two sides to the coin,
Yeah.
but my best friend now, it was just the Passover holiday, and we always had Passover together. And now, her extended family between her, she's got two daughters, so they
Hmm.
both have in-laws, and the in-laws, there are other children that are part of the attached to the in-laws, and other grandchildren attached to the in-laws, and grandchildren attached to her daughters. So the family is just too big for me to be part of it anymore. So
Yeah.
that's a change you see coming. When I remember I was getting my divorce, and she would ask me what part of the baby did I want her to kiss. It was
Part
something
of
I
the
couldn't
baby.
relate to. Her biggest problem was getting a babysitter. My biggest
What
problem was making rent. It
She
was,
asked you what part of the baby did you want
did
her
I?
to kiss?
Yes, right.
Wow.
You want me to kiss her tush, or you want me to kiss the top of her head, or on her belly, or
I thought I
whatever?
I
But
thought I
you
heard
know,
everything. Here I thought we were going to have a quick show because we started late, but you know what? It's the hour's almost up.
yep,
So why don't you just tell people how they can get a hold of the great Adrienne Gruberg, founder of the
be
Caregiver
great.
Space, of 165,000 people who just follow
Yeah.
your every word. You're a celebrity
Well,
in your
it's
own
not really
right.
my every word. It's Corey. It's Corey's every word. I'm the face, but she's the guts at this point.
She must have learned a
Uh,
lot from you because
she
you're the
she she
mentor.
learned from me, but sh there are things she knows that I could never learn. All the computer things, the algorithms, the math, no way. So anyway, I'm Adrienne. It's ADRIENNE at the caregiver space.org, and it's the caregiverspace.org for the website, and you can find us on Facebook and Instagram and every other platform there is.
I know there are so many platforms to be on,
Yeah,
7 or 8, and I just tell my person who does just post them to everything, everywhere.
yeah,
And I have an assistant because it is such busy work to
yeah,
do the post and then to post them here, post them on Instagram, post them on LinkedIn, post them on. And I said, oh my gosh,
yeah.
everybody needs an assistant, and so I'm glad you have one.
Well, she's not
I
an assistant. She's my director.
Oh, well,
She's a
that's better than an
director.
assistant. I just have
Oh,
an
she's
assistant.
no. I need another assistant. But
You do, huh?
yeah, Yeah,
Well,
but
let
I
me
can't
let me
really
know how that
afford
works
another
out. Yeah,
assistant. I
they
can't really
cost
afford
they
another
cost money,
assistant.
don't they?
Yes, they do. No, Corey's worth every penny.
Yeah. Well, listen, I'm Dave, the Caregiver's Caregiver, and my website is caregiverscaregiver.com. And we just want to thank you all for tuning in, and we're here every Wednesday at noon. And just, we will see you next week. That's all I can say. Visit our website, take our free quiz, Are You a Candidate for Burnout? And I'm going to send you a copy of my very, very first book. It is so old, but is so relevant. Talks about overcoming unbelievable hardships because I did it, my wife did it, and we're here to tell the world about it, that you don't have to quit, you don't have to give up because this too will pass, to quote a Bible verse. So goodbye, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Thank you for joining Dave, the Caregiver's Caregiver radio show. Make sure you tune in every Wednesday at noon Pacific Time and anytime afterwards on podcast to catch more of Dave and his tips to caregivers on avoiding burnout and surviving the grief process right here on the Worldwide Block Talk Radio Network. Goodbye.